just a couple minutes. I like to start around 10. But. That one's cute.
That's our care team.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Diane.
Diane.
Oh, I love it. That's so
cute.
cute.
The care team.
I love it.
Get in, loser.
Super cute.
Caring.
I love it. I love it. And the little Care Bear. I love it. Yeah.
I don't know. Did I?
Heck yeah. I think it's cute. Make like your own little Care Bear.
Joking. He's like, keep that to yourself. Keep that to yourself.
All right, we'll go ahead and start up. Hello, hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Let everybody get kind of settled in here. Hope you're enjoying your lunch. So we're going to go ahead and get started. It's about time, 10 after. So my name's Charlie. I am kind of on the equity board, so here I am to announce our Kindred Spirits today. But before I get in too much with the announcement, I wanted to do a couple other announcements. So April is Pride Month, ASU's recognition of Pride Month. So for the month or the week of the 15th through the 19th, we're going to have some Pride-themed events coming up. You'll see some posters going around, some emails coming out, those kinds of things. So definitely check out our events. I think we have a Sexual Assault Awareness Month also going on this month. We'll have an event on the 20th, and then we'll have another event on the 11th, I believe. Tucasa will be here for a couple things, so check those guys out as well. We'll have a couple posters, those kinds of things as well. I think that's it for April. So we will go ahead and get into our Kindred Spirits. Today we have Savala and Aftin, and they are going to be presenting building a community of care for student success. Give them a hand.
So I will start by saying that Aftin's name is actually Aftin and not Afting, and my apologies for having that in there. If you would, do I have a clicker? Hot dog. I never get trusted with the clicker, so this is now like officially exciting. Hey. So our goals for today, and I promise for those that have attended other sessions with me, there is not a think, pair, share today. I know that sometimes can be a little off-putting, but we do have goals for today. And the first is to really understand the roles of care teams on campuses. You can't hear me? If I'm way up here and make it. Okay. Can I hold it a little ways away from my mouth? Aftin and I are going to pass this back and forth, and I come from a time of presentations during COVID, so I don't want to pass that. So goals for today. First, want to understand the roles of care teams on university campuses, on our campus, and how you play into the role of the care team as students and as employees. I want us to be able to identify concerning behavior of students and of our colleagues. Okay, so when we talk about a community of care for student success, it's not only concerning behaviors that we see in students, it's concerning behaviors that we see in colleagues too, because when we support our colleagues to be the best they can be and to be successful, they can then turn around and support student success. So that's an important piece that I want everybody to keep in mind. And then finally, how you can make active referrals, and then what happens next? What happens beyond the referral piece? So why do we have a care team? The purpose of a care team, nationally, is to be able to evaluate, assess, connect students of concern. And this really started decades ago when universities started seeing student behavior that was a little bit concerning but then turned into major events. So if everybody can think back to something like Virginia Tech, when incidents like that were happening on campuses and those campuses did not have thorough referral processes, did not have ways for people to refer student behavior that was concerning, or even just when students were a little off of baseline, which we'll talk about, they recognized that there was a gap in the information that we have about students and being able to keep campuses safe for all student success. Now, when I talk about campus safety and that being part of student success, that's not only the other students that are surrounding this student of concern, right? We want the student of concern to also be safe. The student of concern also has to have access to their education. And so when we talk about building that full structure of success, it's really with all students in mind, and often especially the student that we are concerned about. The key functions of a care team, and I should add, many campuses refer to a care team as a BIT team. That's behavior intervention team. Some campuses have two separate teams. One is the care team, which is the snuggly hugs of let us help you get connected to resources. On our campus, we are the Care Bears. We really enjoy that. I think that President Tamberg doesn't enjoy it as much, but we're keeping it. But on many campuses, the care team is kind of that, let us support you, let us wrap around services, and the BIT team is more of, is there a threat? On our campus, we do both. We want to support the student in wraparound care, and we do that, but at the same time, we're trying to make sure that there's not a threat to campus that could come by this student's actions. So the key functions of our care team, and I'll kind of walk you through it as if we had a case, right? So you refer a student who has some off-base behavior. Our first function as a care team is to assess what is going on with that student, and that's a holistic assessment. So on our care team, we have Aftin from counseling, we have me from the student affairs perspective, we have Gina, we have Diane who brings in the housing perspective, we have PD, we have Trevor from academic success, we have Tracy from HR, and really this gives us the opportunity to look from a holistic view of, okay, what is going on with this student? Are there other places where we're interacting with this student's name? Does anybody in this room have a relationship already built with the student? Because really what we want when we connect this student to resources is to have that be a familiar face and a familiar name that is reaching out to them, rather than, okay, well, student affairs reached out to me, that's a faceless entity reaching out to somebody they don't know. So first we assess what is going on. The next step is to say, okay, based on these behaviors that we're seeing, what resources would be best to connect this student in order to help them get through whatever this maybe potential crisis is that they're going through? Maybe it's an ongoing thing, but what are the connections that are the most useful for this student, and how do we make those connections with that student? And then finally, we look at it and say, okay, based on this report, based on what we know about this student in these other areas, are there any threats to campus that we also need to consider? And if there are, how do we mitigate that? Or if there is potential, how do we watch for further signs that maybe this is moving in a direction that is not good for campus? And so our role really is to support the student while also protecting campus. And it's kind of a big cause, right? So finally, the role that employees and students play. And we're going to hammer this a lot, and I'm not even going to apologize. The best thing that faculty, staff, and students can do when you are concerned about somebody, and I don't care if it's a concern like they usually come to class every single day and now they've missed 2 days, or my roommate is usually really social and they've been spending a lot of time in their room lately. I don't care if you don't think it is a big concern. Please make a report on our person of concern form so that care team can act on that. Even if it's something that we don't need to act on, let the people in the room that have that wide knowledge make that assessment, okay? What you're seeing is a snapshot in time. And if you have a really good relationship with a student and something suddenly is off, that's even more reason to be concerned. What I tell students in first-year seminar classes and what I tell anybody who will listen, do not shoulder the burden of a person of concern on your own, okay? If you're worried about a student, if you're worried about a colleague, you have enough of your own issues and enough of your own stress to be handling on your own. Hand that over to a team of people who are trained to help that student or colleague. The best way you can do it is a warm handoff, and we'll talk about that, but at the very least, send in a person of concern so that we can start getting that person connected, whether it's a colleague or a student.
All right. I just want to reiterate that CARE team operates to also support faculty and staff as well. And so not just students, but anybody who is off baseline, which I'm going to talk about now. So make sure you submit a concern form. That's why Tracy from HR does sit on our CARE team to make sure faculty and staff are referred to resources and have what they need to do their jobs as well. All right, so how do you know when to submit a concern? Essentially, the basic, quick way of knowing is judging based off of somebody's baseline behavior. So when we have interactions or relationships with people, we essentially establish a set of behaviors, what is normal with them, right? They might be introvert, they might be extrovert, they might be really talkative, they might not be so talkative. And so we establish what is normal for that individual, varies from individual. When somebody changes that, when an extrovert becomes introvert, or somebody who talks a lot stops talking a lot, somebody who cares about their appearance stops caring about their appearance. Anything that is abnormal for that individual starts to change, is considered being off of baseline. And there might be something underlying happening. So another thing with baseline is sometimes your gut or your intuition. You have a relationship with somebody, you know what that looks like, and something about that interaction has just changed. So NBITA has defined kind of further a couple. NBITA is one of our professional organizations that informs our practices on the CARE team. Just looking at further definitions of concerning behavior would be difficulty adjusting to college or struggling with homesickness. So freshmen that are coming to campus, you're going to probably see this a lot more, just with the adjustment. If we can intervene early, we can maybe connect them to the resources that they need to help them better succeed that first year. Change or decline in academic performance, attendance, or assigned responsibilities. Again, somebody who is academically involved, stops showing up to class, change in baseline behavior there. Inappropriate or excessive unwanted attempts to interact. So someone who is starting to withdraw. Extreme or prolonged changes in emotional expression. So either both ways, right? So somebody who is often teary, maybe even angry, is a sign for concern. Changes in physical appearance or well-being. Social isolation or concerns regarding peers, family, or any relationship problems. Noticeable or alleged drug use or alcohol abuse. And this is where I think students come in with their looking out for each other. So students are often the people who know whether other students or fellow students are engaging in a lot of alcohol or drug use. So let's see. Unusual, irrational, or disconnected, aggressive, disruptive thoughts or behaviors. So if someone is talking to you about what they're experiencing, what might be getting in the way of their success. References of harming self or suicidal thoughts or death. So I think it's important to understand that there is a difference between self-harm or non-suicidal self-injury, suicidal thoughts, and wanting to die. Then overt statements about harming someone else, all right? So essentially anything that is out of the normal. And I would say this is a quick list, but back to it's always better to refer if you're concerned, if you see any changes, than to not refer. There are college campuses who have gotten into some trouble with Cleary because people on campus knew something was off with a student and nothing was done. So I think you're next.
So the referral process, and here's what I would love. Everybody who has a phone, which I think is all of you, go ahead, scan that QR code, and then save that tab on your phone. That is a link directly to our person of concern form. And if you save that tab on your phone, you're never going to be in a situation where you say, I don't know where to find that, because it's already on your phone. So first, I want to talk about the importance of early referral. Aftin started to talk about this a little bit, but really what we want to see is, I'll provide an example. Let's say that a student is working with you and they talk about being a little bit homesick. They wish that they could go home on the weekends. They miss their family. And it's just one of those things that you're like, well, yeah, I mean, all students go through homesickness. There's actually a cycle. All students go through homesickness right around week 4. That's like the special witching hour. But we think of it as normal conversation, right? Oh, the student is far away from home. They're dealing with homesickness. And we write it off. And a few weeks later, the student is maybe not doing well in class. They're not showing up. They're trying to find ways to get home. They're not interacting with their friends as much. Student really wants to be at home. And you're thinking, well, you know, we're coming up on break. Student's going to go home for a few days. They'll get recharged. They'll come back. They'll be fine. Student comes back. They've had maybe 2 days with their family. Yeah, that was really nice. Not enough to recharge. Not enough to really reset. And so they get further behind in your class, or they become more quiet as the friend. And then at some point, that friend of yours or that student of yours is now talking about maybe having to drop your class or having to drop out because they're failing. And that's when you decide to put in a referral. Nope, back that train up. Do not wait until it hits crisis point to refer a student. Back when that student first started talking about how much they miss their family, or I really don't feel like I fit in, or I'm having a hard time making friends because I miss my friends at home, those are the times when you put in a referral. The earlier the better. The sooner we can help a student connect either academically or socially, or help them get connected maybe to counseling to help with the homesickness, the earlier we can triage those things, the better for the student. So if you fill out a person of concern form, here's what is going to happen. 1, we will do outreach to the student after we meet together as a group, and we'll say, you know, kind of what else are we seeing with this student? And we'll send outreach to the student and say, you know, we've heard that you might be going through some difficult things or a difficult time, or that you might be struggling with X. Please know that there are resources on campus that can help you. We take your confidentiality seriously, and this is not something that we're sharing. If you would like information, these are different ways that you can connect. It's very much agency-oriented to the student. They still need to engage in some way. We are not forcibly going and finding them and bringing them to care team. And so we hope to engage the student in a way that they're comfortable with. I've been in higher ed for many years. I'm not going to say how many because now I feel old. But in all the time I've been doing that, I've had exactly one student who has responded and said, leave me alone, it's none of your business. Whoever couldn't mind their own business, blah, 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 insert expletive here. I've had one in my entire career. Most of the time, what you get back is, thank you so much for checking on me. Things are okay. Interesting to hear that somebody was worried. I've had people respond and say, yeah, actually, I would be interested in maybe counseling calling me. Can they call me? Yeah, sure, you have a phone. So often, students are not offended that somebody cared enough to say that they were concerned. You, as the person who fills out the form, we don't tell them who filled out the form. If you want to fill it out anonymously, you can fill it out anonymously, and then I couldn't tell me who filled out the form. But the important thing is to fill out the form. Now let's talk about confidentiality and privacy a little bit when that happens. The first part of confidentiality is what I hear often from colleagues, is that, well, the student told me that in confidence, and I need to respect that confidence. So this is the part where I tell you, there is exactly 4 people on campus who have confidentiality, and that is Aftin and the people in the counseling center. That's where confidentiality lives. Title IX has confidentiality in their reporting. But when it comes to a student of concern, student walks into Margaret's office, says, Margaret, I'm thinking of dropping out. I have a ton of stress. I don't know what to do, and my dad just passed away, but don't tell anybody. Margaret actually does not have a confidentiality piece there, all right? So Margaret arguably has a responsibility to help that student get connected, okay? Privacy is something different. You know, you can tell a student this is gonna be private, and we tell students when we reach out to them, our conversations are private. Anything you wanna share with us are private. That can be wildly infuriating as somebody who sent in a person of concern form. You want to know what's going on. You want to know the details. You want to know what the next steps are. You want to know that outreach has been done. And there's only so much we can tell you. It's much like trying to tell a parent about FERPA, right? Your student's educational records belong to the student, and they have to tell me what I can tell you. Care team is very much the same way. I am not going to reach back out to a referring person to say, well, these are all the steps that we're taking, and this is what the student has agreed to do, and this is the communication. The best we can do is to respond to you and say, your concern form has been received. We are actively working to connect the student with resources. I'm just gonna let you in on a secret. That is code for we have communicated with the student and they are communicating with us and that they are getting connected. That's all you need to know, is that they are getting connected. If concerns continue, yes, do send more forms. It is absolutely fine after you have an initial concern and you're like, well, I'm still concerned. Language has changed and maybe it's worse, or I'm still concerned. There's this new thing that's come up. Do fill out another concern form, because that gives us a bigger picture of what's going on with a student, okay? So questions about confidentiality and privacy. And I know that that can get sometimes confusing and sometimes just maddening at how much we can share back. Okay. Did everybody get the QR code? Because I will awkwardly stay on this slide for a very long time.
All right. So beyond submitting a concern form, especially for those of you who have really good relationships with students or student-facing faculty, staff that work closely with students, sometimes you need to have that conversation with the student, letting them know that you're concerned. So I talk about acting, right? Using the acronym ACT. So you have a concern, you're going to act on that. That means you're gonna ask, you're gonna show that you care, and you're gonna tell somebody. The telling part is submitting a concern, or maybe that's also submitting a concern form and in tandem walking them over to the counseling center. Our counseling center does have walk-in hours from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., which means that a counselor is going to be available for any student that comes in during that time, most of the time. If we only have one counselor and that hour is being used, then it might be off on that. But most of the time we will have that. Another thing with me is if there is an emergency situation, Gina and Savala know to let me know that we need to see a student right away. My clients know about that, and we can reschedule if we need to in an emergency situation. Which I do want to add to what Dr. DeVoge was talking about a second ago regarding our process. Just to let you know, if there is an emergency, we will make contact with that student. So if there is a concern for suicide or harm to self, that is not an outreach saying, hey, services are available. We will initiate a welfare check as soon as possible to get eyes on the student and do a welfare check, an assessment of where they are and what needs to happen right away. So referring to counseling, a warm handoff, oftentimes it can be difficult to refer a student to counseling if you don't believe in counseling or mental health for yourself. So I think one of the things is keep that in check for yourself. If you've had trouble in counseling or maybe it hasn't worked for you, consider that it's different for a student who might be going through this time in their life, might need some skills to get through this, ultimately lending to their success and getting across the stage at graduation. I think finally, you all have received all of the emails for our mental health first aid training. Those are going to be offered hopefully in the future a couple times a semester. So come get trained in mental health first aid so that you can be better equipped to handle mental health concerns and the referral process.
I think one thing that I do want to add about mental health first aid is that while it is important for all of us to be trained in mental health first aid, really it is a tool in your toolbox for how to identify when something is of concern. Mental health first aid does not make you like a brain EMT that you can treat things or that you can address things. Really, it is a tool to help you decide when something needs to be reported or when someone needs to be walked over to counseling. And I think that it's important to remember that it's one of those things that we can use, but it's not one of those things that suddenly makes us a counselor, thankfully. And that's why we have Aftin, because there's a reason that people like Aftin are in counseling, and I'm not. So resources and support, and we've spent a lot of time talking about kind of the student end of this, how we can help students, but a big part of care team, and as Aftin said, part of the reason that Tracy from HR is on that care team is really supporting our colleagues too. And so we do have some resources here on this front table if everybody wants to grab on your way out for the State Employee Assistance Program, ways that you can reach out to get help for yourself, or even take some information for a colleague that you maybe notice something about. Take a few so that you have them at your desk. So that as you're talking to a colleague, if something comes up that you're like, really maybe you should talk to somebody who is a professional and here's how you can get in touch with them and it's free. Very helpful. Again, part of that is to kind of check our own bias, right? So if counseling has not worked for me, we still need to allow other people to decide whether or not counseling works for them or other support services work for them. And so that, having that warm handoff and having some information available for our colleagues is also very helpful. Counseling services. Counseling, I tell students this, I tell parents this, during college is the only time you will ever hear the word free when it comes to counseling for your student. Many places, so back to our colleagues, many places do not offer a benefit of free counseling. And so we, as employees, have that access as well. One of the few places you're gonna hear free in counseling. But for our students, that is why we have counselors on campus, okay? It is free. Now, we obviously have counseling services within the community, and if students make a better connection somewhere out in the wild than they do here, that's fine. But where I always try to start with students is with resources that are free to them, resources that are accessible, resources that have multiple options. And that's really where our counseling services comes in. There's a reason that I refer to Aftin as, she's our student support welfare check person. Anytime we have had a concern come in that kind of raises the hair on the back of your neck and goes, oh, maybe this student needs someone before next Monday, Aftin is always my first call, because Aftin has such a good way with students. And, I joke around and say that when we have students that are of concern, maybe not for themselves, but for others, that we're also going to send one of the PD. Aftin is the unofficial official partner, who also gets to go with them. So,
My badge.
yeah, we'll get you a badge and maybe a vest so that you can feel cool. Another area to really kind of send students, as we're talking about warm handoff options, warm handoff to counseling. And an easy way to do that, don't lie, please, but an easy way to do that is to say, you know what, I found counseling to be really helpful at times. I know people over in counseling. Would you like me to walk over with you and introduce you to somebody over there so that you can get connected? You can also say, would you like me to do an email introduction, or ways that you can actively connect the student. But that also works for things like academic support, tutoring. So if you have a student that's struggling in one of your classes, or if you have a student in your program that's talking about how difficult a class is and they're just not getting it, well, let me walk you over to the tutoring center. Let's talk about how we can get you set up with a tutor. That can really help you to figure out how to work through the content. Is it because you're having a hard time knowing the difference of taking notes in a history class and taking notes in a psychology class? They're different. Is it a time management issue? Is it any of these things? Let me walk you over and show you where that resource is. It's about making time for our students. It's about making time for our friends, making time for our colleagues. Over there is also accommodations. So the number of students, and I'm sure the number has gone up, but the highest number of diagnoses for mental health concerns and for mental health disabilities and anxiety and all those pieces is between the ages of 18 and 24. Well, guess who we have? We've got 18 to 24-year-olds mostly, and then a smattering on either end. But really, this is the time when students start to have diagnoses that would entitle that to accommodations. We also have a number of students at every campus across the country who come in with this mindset of, that's who I was in high school. I don't want anybody here to know that I have dyslexia or that I have anxiety or that I have depression, whatever X is, right? I don't want people here to know because I don't want that to be me. I don't want that to be how they define me. And then they make it through the first semester, they scrape by and realize, maybe I do need the accommodations that I'm entitled to that come with this. A big thing that we can do as employees when we're talking to students and when students are saying that language of, I had that accommodation in high school, I don't want it to be who I am here. The point of accommodations in college is to level the playing field, okay? We want every single one of our students to have the same access to education, to have the same shot. And in order to do that, that's why we have an accommodations office, to make sure that they have the same shot here that every other student has. And so when we talk about the way that we respond to students with that kind of language of, that's who I was in high school, that is something that has not gone away, I promise you. But let's talk about what that meant in high school, and let's talk about what it means here. Because here, you have the support that can make sure that you are starting on a level playing field. And that's what we want. We want you to have the same playing field as everybody else. So before we do this.
I'll just add one thing. If you are talking to a student who is receiving counseling services and they're saying, it's not really working for me, reach out to me because we can switch counselors. Oftentimes, we don't connect with the first person that we have in counseling. I know that's true for myself in my own counseling. Especially once I became a counselor, I had to be really picky about who I wanted to help me with my own mental health. So if they're struggling with the relationship with their counselor, reach out to me and I can have that conversation either with them or have them reach out to me and we can do a counselor switch. We do have 5 of us right now up there, that we can maybe find a better fit.
So before we get to questions, one thing I do want to add, and it's something that can be a little bit of a gray area, right, is when is something a concern or when is something a student conduct violation? Student conduct also sits in care team. That's me. So often it's, all right, student did this thing. That's a student conduct violation. Let's just send them through the conduct process. Often, student behavior is in reaction to something that is going on in their life around them, and it is very often something that you don't know about. Something just happened at home. Something happened with a friend. Something happened on a team. They just got an F in a class right before they walked into your class, and now is the outburst. So before heading straight to, oh, that's a student conduct violation, I'm going to make a report, I would encourage you to start with a care team report. Student conduct sits in that room. And if we decide that it is a student conduct violation, I will follow up from a student conduct side as well and allow care team to step in on a resource side to support that student also through the student conduct process. Does that make sense? So start with the person of concern. We'll get it to where it needs to go, rather than go straight to, oh, this is student conduct. All right? Now, I think we are ready for questions.
So students experiencing crises don't always experience them between 8 and 5, Monday to Friday. Where does one go? Who does one contact after hours?
Did everybody hear Margaret's question? So if a student is in crisis, as they always are outside of business hours, who do we contact? A great contact first is PD to make sure that that report gets made. And I want to stress that PD on a college campus is different than PD with a city or with a state entity. Our PD's first response is for student welfare. And so if you have a student in crisis, our PD can respond to that, but they will also reach out to me, and they often reach out to Aftin. So that core group of initial response people are still going to get that, does not matter if it's during business hours. So if you're concerned, we're concerned. Don't wait until the following Monday. Question?
Yes, I have a question about the internal referral process that you just described. What about, for example, parents from an outside perspective? Do they still use that process, or is it totally something different?
So if a parent is referring their student, same process. So if you have a parent call and they're worried about their student, and I tell parents this all the time, you know your student better than I ever will, I would think. So if you're concerned, I'm concerned, and they can fill out a person of concern form. They can do it anonymously. They can put their name on it. We got one at my previous campus from a parent that said, also don't tell them that I submitted this. Okay. It happens a lot when parents submit concern forms. Don't tell them I'm worried. They know you're worried. It's fine. They know. But yes, send parents to the same site.
Short of the crisis situation, do you guys meet weekly, or do you meet every time a situation arises?
So yes and yes. We meet, I should tell you to answer these questions. Aftin and I have a daily check-in every morning. And part of that is, did we get any referrals since yesterday when we checked in at the end of the day? We see each other a lot. Have there been any new referrals? What's the immediate response? If there's something that is more immediate than that, we are furiously responding to care forms with each other and with our team of, okay, who's gonna do the outreach? Who is doing the welfare check right now? What's the immediate response? If there are things that can wait, we meet every other week, and we go through every single person on our list, not just the new people. We are constantly reassessing our list of students to see, have they responded to getting connected? Are they connected? Have we received any additional reports on this student? So we meet regularly, even if there are not new students, but then Aftin and I meet, we see each other a lot. Did that answer your question? Yeah, okay. Other questions? Yeah.
What happens if a student refuses to get help from the cares team?
That happens a lot, Aftin.
The question was, what happens if a student refuses to receive help? So it can be really difficult to force a student to receive help. There's some situations where Dr. DeVoge might be able to have a more strong hand, but essentially with counseling, even one of our code of ethics is giving people the autonomy to take care of themselves. And so we will not stop reaching out to a student to receive help, but it is up to them. And it's a better treatment plan too when you're invested in your own care and your own mental health rather than being forced to come in. Probably not the best answer, but we can't force people to respond to services or act in services.
I think where that changes is if a student is actually a threat to campus. And, the language on care team is what can we do for or with this student? But when a student becomes an actual threat to campus, the language kind of changes to what do we do to this student? Because that kind of agency is taken away if that student is an active threat. Any other questions before we go? I'll let you finish enjoying your lunch, Aftin.
So this has nothing to do with care team, but students for this month's 420 events, Delilah has the bingo cards for prizes or, I don't know, at the end of the month, there's something happening, yeah.
Yeah, there's a raffle-y thing. So students, if you're in the room, see Delilah and get those bingo cards. Did I see one more hand?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess it's a rather specific question. Like, what if after I meet with a student, I refer them to counseling services and they're like, oh, I know, I'll go maybe. And like, do I still proceed with the form of concern if I'm still like not sure the student's gonna follow through with that?
Yeah, it's weird how many students don't follow through with things, right? So the question was, if I'm talking to a student and tell them about counseling, they say, oh yeah, I know, I'll go, but should you still do a form? Yes, please, still do a form, because that way, students have the best of intentions, right? And they do intend to go often when they say, oh, I know where that is, I'll go. And then they have a life and it gets busy. And so having that form on our end as well allows us to do outreach to make that connection again. Can we get you in? We can make you an appointment. We can make it really easy. So yes, still do the form.
Just to add to that too, your concern form, submitting that concern form is taking that onus off of you. So if something bad were to happen and that student that you referred to counseling and then you didn't submit the concern form and then something bad were to happen, then you're dealing with the guilt for not telling somebody. And so you're passing that off for us to take care of the student at that point, and you can have that sigh of relief if anything happens. You did everything in your power.
Well, thank you, everybody, for coming to our conversation. I hope that this conversation continues. Keep that tab saved on your phone. But if you do have questions that come up, even if it's something like, this student is doing this, is this something that I should put in a form for? Often we'll say yes, but feel free to reach out and say, is this something that should be a concern? We're happy to answer those questions as we go, because really what we're all in for, I think everybody in this room, is the success of our students, our peers, our colleagues. We just want campus to be a place where everybody can thrive. And this is one of the tools that we have to make that happen. So thank you, all of you, for being here and for taking that next step.